can you share the best piece of advice you ever had?
Yeah, I was looking at this. I haven't got like kind of really clear things. Two things stuck in my mind though. That was when I was setting up the business again, I had conversations with people about how it worked and the people I admired and what I looked at. And someone said to me, overnight success takes 5 years. And it was like, oh, that's interesting. What do you mean by that? And he said, well, actually, it takes time to build up those opportunities. And as I said, those three things need to align: the need, the resources, and the interest in working with you. And I think a lot of that then is around actually being around for the work when it turns up. So I think in terms of, and I'm now in a position that in terms of our capacity, in terms of the busyness of the business, that I just couldn't. People talked about, but I couldn't tangibly kind of feel 3 years ago. It just didn't, because it was so far away from where I was to where I am now. So that kind of, I think that stuck with me. And again, having a bit of a long-term vision in terms of what's going on. So maybe I'll stop there. Actually, that's a good maybe piece of advice that I've held on to.
I think it's spot on. Do you have a business that you see almost that you want to replicate or copy, or doing something similar to what you've done that you kind of see the model?
No, I don't think so. I wouldn't say there's a model that I'm aspiring to be the equivalent of this or that. I do. There's a lot of people that I admire working in this space, and I would see them as kind of. I try and approach as collaborators rather than competitors, if that makes sense. And so there's lots of those, but there's no one that I'm saying I'm going to base my model on this.
Because are you obviously? I know you're a sportsman. Do you know Peloton?
Yes. Yeah.
So one of the things I really respect about Peloton is that now they did $1.2 billion in revenue last year. And they didn't, in theory, do anything which was that revolutionary. They just took live stream classes to a very high level into people's homes and made it slick and easy and stuff. But now it seems obvious that they're so successful. It took them 3 years from when they first launched to actually kind of do anything or take off. And this is a company that now does $1 billion. So it just lines up exactly with what you're saying. That what I'm trying to do longer term is to create the Peloton of business education. But it's the same kind of look, feel, style. But that is where I'm aiming for. So I love to, there's some really good articles online where you can see how other people float and what they did. And then learn from it, if that makes sense. But I'm always fascinated about what people have done.
And I think that's a really nice way of looking at it. And again, I'm one of the podcasts I listen to, an avid podcast listener, and how I built this and other podcasts that talk about how business has developed is something that I'm fascinated by in terms of hearing people's stories and how they did it.
Because I watched one with the chap that launched Moonpig. So it was it was a Stephen Bartlett interview, and I'll be honest, I know a lot of people love him, and I wasn't sure. I don't know. I just wasn't sure. But actually, the more I'm watching the stuff, the more I actually like him now. But anyway, but it was and Nick Jenkins, and he was basically saying how difficult it was. And bear in mind, they're now at $1.6 billion in revenue. And it's in theory a no-brainer for their business model about how it's clever and how it works and stuff. But they again had 5 years. Like people ask him, obviously I'm paraphrasing the interview, people ask him, did you ever have a rough patch at Moonpig? And he says, yes, we had one. But it lasted from 2010 to 2015. As in, it was a 5-year rough patch. But the point is, even now, companies that are super, super successful, everyone almost goes through that. And it's people often forget or they have short memories. And even Apple had tough times. And but I like to learn from it and model it. And anyway, that
makes a lot of sense. That makes complete sense to me. And again, I think from me personally, I find hearing stories from other people is really helpful. The one thing I think is really helpful to tell myself though, is that you're only hearing about the stories that have been successful. So sometimes you can fetishize the kind of some of the stories, but you don't hear about the ones that got to a similar point and didn't work for them. And I think you can probably learn even more from those that you do from the successes. So I think that's just useful to have in the back of your mind as well when you're listening to this stuff.
I must think you're probably talking 95%, if not 99% of the stories you never hear.
Yes,
that's a very good point. My next question is that if you were to give advice to your younger self, so this could be Rob at school, it could be in Melbourne, it could be at Sheffield, it could be whichever, what would it be? Or it could even be Rob in the car that one time.
Yeah, I think I'm someone, although it's interesting in positives, I think take things quite seriously, and I spend a lot of time kind of in my own head. And I don't think there's an advice. I think probably to be a bit kinder to myself. I think in terms of would be the advice that I think my current Rob still says this to me now. Like, and again, I'm aware of it, but I struggle with it. So I think in terms of being the kind of stuff, and I think so I think just being kinder, I think to myself, and I think that's I think a lot of people can hear that. I think the difficulty, the challenge is actually then taking action upon it. Again, a lot of these things is easy to recognize, but then what do you do with that, and how do what do you do practically to apply that?
But I think just people will take value hearing this, and as I do. Almost, I'm completely selfish. At just every interview, actually, I learn something. So that's the only reason. But I think it's true that, especially if it's a smaller team, you can get trapped and you worry and you do things. But actually, the interview on Thursday, a lady called Katie was talking about stoicism. And anyway, but we were talking about how actually just what advice would you give your best friend in the same example? We're all very, very critical on ourselves, but actually I think we're very harsh on ourselves. I think it's very true.